Today we have FixEight, a terrible name for a great game by Toplin. First off, you have your choice of 8 different characters, and they each have their own abilities and weapons. And after choosing the character, it of course drops you off into a war zone. If you look at the gameplay, you might say, this looks a lot like a game like Commando. But it actually plays like a hybrid of that and a more traditional shoot 'em up. This is due in part to the weapon you can change into, which always shoots forwards, and also due in part to the enemy design. It's an interesting combination that you don't see much of, but if you've ever played the game OutZone, this game is actually a sequel to that one. And like OutZone, the game just oozes creativity in the enemy designs, and the levels are pretty interesting as well, with all kinds of walls to hide behind and ledges to fall off of. The level of detail in the artwork and animation is also quite impressive, like look at the grass blowing in this stage. And I feel like that care and attention to detail seen in the artwork really carries over into the gameplay. This game is very well made, with the enemy behaviors all exhibiting very complex patterns. And the enemy placement is also quite well thought out and always keeps you on your toes. If I do have a beef with the level design, it's that the difficulty curve isn't always that even. Some of the sections in these levels are just brutal, and occasionally they're much harder than what comes next. But that's not a huge deal. I still enjoy it much more than the predecessor OutZone, in part because you get to continue where you died. In OutZone it sends you back to its checkpoint, and I find that to be very frustrating. One thing I really like about FixEight is the power-up system, because it really makes you think about what weapon you really want to take on the next section of the level, because one gun can aim in any direction and one always aims up but lets you strafe. And you can only change between them on these fluorescent panels that you step on. So you have 2 very different gameplay styles to choose from depending on what you need for that next part of the level. And OutZone did that as well. That's kind of one of the gimmicks of this series. This boss here is one of the highlights of the game for me. The bosses in FixEight are all quite clever and try to trap you in various ways. For example, this boss here has floors that disappear in various patterns. It's all really cool and a lot of fun to play. But to enjoy FixEight, I think you're going to have to really like very hard games, because FixEight, even on easy, which is what I'm playing this on, is no cakewalk. But it never feels cheap. Everything feels like you could dodge it with enough practice, and it's not a memorizer. It just likes to throw really hard stuff at you. And there's so much variety in it and neat ideas that I think it's fun to just credit feed, even if you're, not planning to beat the game on 1/4. Now, one downside of FixEight, I have to say, is the audio. Now, you might be watching this thinking it's really tinny, and it's not the way I recorded it, it's not the arcade cab. FixEight just has a really tinny audio, and if you boot it up in MAME, it's about the same. I also didn't find the music all that memorable, which is unusual for me and a Toplin game. All that said, it does suit the action quite well. Now, if you're thinking this looks cool and you'd like to get a copy of FixEight, unfortunately there aren't any home ports of the game. There is just an arcade PCB, which is what you're watching here. They're not horrendously expensive as PCBs go. They're about $100, give or take. If you keep an eye out on collectors forums, they do pop up from time to time, but they're not terribly common. I got this one from Shmups forum member Dub Thank you Dub for selling me your board. And thank you for watching this, and be sure to subscribe for more cool videos on somewhat obscure games. I'll catch you next time.